Well, it's now 1:02, so we can get this show on the road, as they say, and go ahead and start the latest installment of the Non-Degree Credentials Research Network's monthly webinar series. Today's presentation is on a report that'll be coming out next month. So we'll be getting a preview here today, a roadmap for the alignment of digital credentials, hiring processes, and technology systems. I thought this was a really interesting topic that speaks directly to obviously the research that many of us are doing, but even those of us who have more of a higher education focus to better understand. And we often think of employers and higher education institutions as being, very distinct actors, but there's actually a lot of interplay between what they are all trying to do to prepare students to enter the world and have a successful career. So, this is really, I think, an interesting opportunity to learn more about the different types of data that exist on the employer side and how we might be able to build bridges between higher ed and employer data systems. So without further ado, we have Anne Nonovic from the Center for the Future of Higher Education and Talent Strategy at Northeastern University, joined by Chris Houston from One Ed Tech and Ellen Stoddard from Fairlead Education. They've been working together on this project among other co-authors. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to our presenters. We'll go for about, I think, usually it's about 20 minutes, half an hour of presentation. And then we'll moderate a little Q&A. So without further ado, go ahead, Ellen, Chris, or Anne.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. Hopefully we have time to go slightly over the 20 to 30 minute mark.
We can do 40.
Okay, I'll take it.
That was just like, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Guess I'll give a few minutes at the important thing is that we just have a little bit of time at the end.
Perfect. Yeah, and just thank you so much for the opportunity to present this very recent research that we've done on the consumer side of non-degree credentials, really looking at what happens after they're issued. As mentioned, this is a report that will be coming out shortly. We're looking at very beginning of September. So again, just grateful to be able to talk about it. So Chris, if you want to go ahead and advance. The agenda for today, we'll be covering our background on the project, our project aims. This is an exploration of how non-degree credentials are being used in hiring and what can be done to address any roadblocks in doing so. Ellen is going to explain the process of this research. Part of that process was really talking with employers and HR leaders, and we developed some HR leader personas, sort of grouping it around what it is they were asking for out of non-degree credential data and process flows. When we found a theme, a pain point in this process for them, our team investigated the technical underpinnings of that. So if there was an issue in, say, data flow of credential data going to the employers, we really looked under the hood and understood how that flow is happening and where there might be breakdowns. As a result of that research, we then generated a roadmap. So this is using a little bit of imagination to match the needs that these employers were expressing with HR tech and ed tech capabilities. So we'll present that today. And finally, as Kyle mentioned, we would love to have some Q&A. Please feel free to populate questions in the chat and we will try to get back to address all of those. Great. So project background and general aims. This is a collaborative project between One Ed Tech, Northeastern University's Center for the Future of Higher Education and Talent Strategy, and the SHRM Foundation. It is funded by the Walmart Foundation, and it builds pretty much directly upon past research that this group has done. I believe Ellen presented on that research in this forum maybe a year or so ago. For this particular project, we're looking at understanding how HR leaders envision improvements to their hiring process. So understanding from them, like what their needs are in order to facilitate a better inclusion of information about non-degree credentials. So getting them to express their needs so that this can work. And then, as I mentioned before, based on that, generating some suggestions or a roadmap to improve this functionality. I think I'm going to go ahead then and kick it over to Ellen to talk about our process.
All right, thanks, Anne. Nice to be with everyone today. So in order to explain a little bit more about our methodology, we want to bring you into what was our process for uncovering some of the information that we'll share today. And we basically see it in these 3 stages. So in order to really understand employer needs and to be able to imagine improvements to the hiring process, specifically those that would help facilitate better inclusion of information about non-degree credentials, we started by conducting a series of 3 workshops. We had 15 HR professionals and hiring managers who were recruited by SHRM to participate. And we formulated questions about really how they consider and use non-degree credentials, specifically the prevalence of those credentials and the usage and the value they provide to hiring managers as they're going through that process. We also asked them about their pain points, their ideas for process improvement in their hiring. And then we took all of that information and we created prototypes. We wanted to solicit more feedback based on some immediate prototypes that they could respond to. So the prototypes were really in sort of a dashboard format where we said, would you like to consume data this way? Would you like to consume data this way? What are the certain things that you might want? Erica, I think you're on up there. Thank you, Erica. So after those prototypes, we went back to our team and we asked them to give us additional feedback. And then we were able to create 4 sort of composite personas, which we'll share in a minute. And each one of these personas, based on the 15 participants, we consolidated things together. Each one of those captures really a particular challenge and a possible solution to that challenge. So then in order to understand really the existing ecosystem and the data flow of information during the hiring process, Chris, who you'll hear from later, applied to 22 jobs, actually applied to the jobs, examined the data flow, and then went through and understood some of the major resume parsing solutions to figure out how that came into play in this data flow. And then finally, in order to envision a different future or some possibilities, we have created a roadmap which envisions the potential for change in this ecosystem and how data could flow in a way that improves the hiring process. So that's really our methodology. And then Chris, you can advance. Thank you. So I'm going to introduce the personas and how we imagine these. We analyzed the feedback that came in during the workshops, as I said. We generated these personas, and really they represent how people are using non-degree credentials. And we found that people basically fall into kind of these 4 perspectives here. So on the top left, we have Nick. Nick is we'll go back one more. Sorry, yeah, thanks. Nick is really eager to rely on non-degree credentials. And wants to have those credentials help him understand the whole person, so the candidate as a whole. Francis, willing to consider non-degree credentials, but is really much more focused on the skill aspect, so really understanding the skills that are represented in those credentials. And then we have Brianna. Brianna represents people who are really actively using these non-degree credentials, but they are feeling the pain of verifying them. So that's a roadblock for the Brianna type. And then Malik represents folks who want to use the non-degree credentials, but they're having trouble fitting them into their existing processes. And so this perspective helps us understand some desires and goals, and also some pain points. So I'm going to toss it to Chris to dive down more deeply into the pain points and some of our investigation around those.
Great, thank you, Ellen. And thanks again for this opportunity to share this information with you all. We do really hope it's helpful. And so just to dive a little bit deeper into the personas, you know, developing these personas, it gave us insight into the different pain points and just other information that also could be helpful during the hiring and recruiting process. And wanted to really dive deeper into the non-degree credential space as well. And so one thing, instead of just, we obviously listened to them, we wanted to do a little bit more research, investigation, just sort of back those up. Yes. Okay. All right. So we, just to kind of circle back on the 4 different personas we had here, they're in the same order listed. So the first one is Nick, focused on the whole person. He wants to trust the information. So that led us to do, an investigation into how the data gets into the system and then sort of what happens once it's there. And then I'll circle back here and I'll talk a little bit about resume parsing. It's maybe a little bit of a hidden part of the process, within hiring today. And so I'll go on to here. So as I can't remember if it was Anne or Ellen said, I applied to 22 different jobs, so 22 unique employers. We're trying to, again, try to follow what's happening with the non-degree credentials. And this is just one sort of example of our research. It's definitely not everything. We're gonna have quite a bit more. We'll have all of it in our paper, which will be out very soon here. It was more of an exercise too, to just sort of understand, identify, like basically what have I observed through this process? What are the patterns and key findings that we could take away from this? And so maybe I'll start with the numbers. So like I said, there were 22 different employers, 22 different positions. I did not actually get any of the positions, in case anyone's wondering. Got a lot of letters of rejection. At any rate, it was what really kind of struck me was some applications went really fast. Some took a long time, between 2 minutes and 35 minutes spending on filling out an application. It went from, hey, all I have to do is provide my LinkedIn, URL, and that was enough, to just minimal info, all the way to, wanting so much information that, I'm taking a full, half hour to just fill out information. I'm not sure if those are on purpose. I mean, there could be strategy around that. I know today one issue is that there's kind of swimming in applicants, not necessarily those who are all qualified. So there's a bit of noise there too. Anyways, keeping an eye on how skills are sort of being worked into this space. 3 of them did explicitly involve skills. A couple of them actually did some skill extraction, which we'll get to in a bit as well. Big variety of ATSs that were used. ATS is applicant tracking system, so that's the system used for managing recruiting and hiring. 14 required an account, which just sort of slowed me down. I understand why they do that. It's so you don't have to fill it all out in one sitting. You can maybe save it and come back, fill in some more before you actually, send it out. Some of them will give it actually a little dashboard sort of a thing that says, hey, we've received your resume or your application, and someone will be contacting you, that kind of stuff. I'd say, yeah, more than half, it looks like, do use resume parsing software, where what that is it takes your unstructured data, whether it's a Word document or PDF, that is your resume. It's unstructured data, which means it's not really machine readable. It's not great for dumping into a database. So what that process is it converts all of the unstructured data into structured data. 4 to 6 of them actually did give you the ability to import data from LinkedIn, and 3 had an autofill sort of feature where it would, you'd first maybe upload your resume, it would parse it and try to autofill as much of the application as possible. One of the issues there though is, it only did so well at being able to guess at some of that data, unfortunately. So one kind of our first question was, how do we, or are non-degree credentials getting lost, or are they still kind of making it through? We found there's really sort of 4 or 5 ways of getting that information to the recruiter and onto the hiring manager. You can put it on your resume, you can put it on your LinkedIn page. And if they import that data from LinkedIn, that's great. Otherwise, it can, just go out to your LinkedIn profile. Yep, there's the ability to, like I just said, upload a resume and it parses it and then it kind of autofills it for you. You can manually enter some. I'll circle back to that in a moment as well. And then, or you could just attach, say if you have a certificate, you could attach that along with your application. One of the key things I was also looking at is there are newer digital credentials, digital badges, verifiable credentials. None of those had any sort of integration, or there was really no way to include that type of digital information into the hiring process. I can't really put it on my resume. I don't know how to share that information with the employer, and they're not giving me a way to do so either through those HR systems. And so that's kind of what we looked at for Nick. For Francis, wants more information, more focus on skills. One of the things that, and this kind of comes back to resume parsing, one of the newer things that they are doing, and I kind of dove deep onto 3 of the major ones, is they're doing something called data enrichment, where they'll parse out your resume, they'll use AI or algorithms to extract what they find as skills. But then it'll take, and those are generally like kind of keyword finding things, but then it will normalize it against some other framework. The one I've seen most often used is Lightcast Open Skills framework. And so, just it solves some semantic problems, because it might say, hey, we found this word, but it's equivalent to this actual skill that's been recognized and is in the Lightcast, previously MZ, previously Burning Glass, in their database. And it's open, so there's actually a page where you can drill into that skill, get a better definition for it. Brianna wanted more integrations, more ability to verify skills. I think one thing we're maybe looking at is a little bit more integration within this space. I know EdTech has quite a bit of integrations between platforms and systems. Finding a little bit less in HR, but that's also kind of growing as these need to kind of work with each other. And let's see, yeah. And then Malik wanted better sort of post-analysis, post-hiring analysis. So better better reporting to inform